The $20,000 I gave my son for a safety net turned into Tommy Bahama shirts and Ray-Ban sunglasses on a beach in Maui. I saw it on the Facebook photos I wasn't in. 14 pieces of proof that I wasn't a mother to them, just an ATM. Hi, friends. I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and now let's step right into the story. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a message from my son, Kevin. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked it up. The words were short, simple. Mom, had to cancel the Hawaii trip. Money's just too tight right now. We're all pretty bummed. I felt a familiar pang of sympathy. My poor Kevin, always working so hard for his family. I typed back, I'm so sorry to hear that, honey. We'll do something special here at home. I believed him. Of course I did. He was my son. So for the rest of that Chicago summer, I picked up extra shifts at the local vet clinic where I worked part-time. The quiet rhythm of cleaning cages and comforting anxious pets was soothing. I told myself that every dollar I put back into my savings was a small act of solidarity. I imagined Kevin and his wife, Tiffany, cutting coupons and making sacrifices, just like I was. We were a family, weathering a storm together. That's what I thought. 3 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday evening, I decided to finally open my Facebook account. I rarely used it, but my granddaughter, Brianna, had posted something about her summer job. As I scrolled, a new album from Tiffany popped up. The cover photo stopped my breath. It was a perfect golden sunset over a turquoise ocean, and in the foreground, my family, all of them. There was Kevin, smiling wider than I'd seen him smile in years, wearing an expensive-looking Tommy Bahama shirt. Tiffany stood beside him in a flowing sea-green silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. My grandchildren, Jordan and Brianna, wore matching Ray-Ban sunglasses. And next to them, beaming, were Tiffany's parents, Robert and Helen Vance. They were all there, on a white sand beach in Maui, at what the location tag clearly identified as the Four Seasons Resort. The caption beneath the photo felt like a punch to the gut. It read, "An unforgettable family vacation." I clicked through the pictures, my hand trembling slightly. 14 of them. Cocktails by the pool, a fancy dinner at a restaurant overlooking the water, a family surfing lesson. Each photo was a perfectly staged performance of a life I was not only excluded from, but was also unknowingly funding. The $20,000 I'd given Kevin just 2 months prior as a financial safety net wasn't in a savings account. It was on their backs, in their glasses, and paying for their oceanfront suite. They hadn't canceled the vacation. They had just canceled me. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone against the wall. I just sat there in the quiet of my kitchen and felt something inside me that had been slowly cracking for 8 years finally turn to dust. I closed the laptop. I decided to wait. The rage was a cold, hard stone in my chest, and I knew with absolute certainty that they would call again. They always did, and this time I would be ready. It all started 8 years ago. My husband Arthur passed away, and the silence in our fully paid-off house in the Chicago suburbs was deafening. He had been a careful man. He left me with a good pension and a savings account that was, by any measure, significant. He'd wanted me to be secure, safe. But the grief hollowed me out, leaving me raw and vulnerable. My only son, Kevin, saw that. He saw a void and knew exactly how to fill it. 2 months after the funeral, he and Tiffany came over for dinner. They brought a casserole and sat at my kitchen table, their faces masks of practiced concern. After an hour of small talk, Kevin cleared his throat. "Mom," he started, his voice soft, "we need to ask you for a favor." He explained that Brianna's 15th birthday was coming up, her quinceañera. They wanted to throw her a party she would never forget, a beautiful memory to cherish forever. The price tag was $10,000. "We'll pay you back in 6 months, I swear," Tiffany added, placing her manicured hand over mine. "It's just, with the timing and everything, were a little short. They were playing on my grief, on my desperate need to feel useful, to still be a mother and a grandmother. I wanted to be part of those beautiful memories. I wanted to feel needed. The next day, I went to the bank and transferred the money. The party was held at a lavish country club I couldn't afford a membership to. Brianna looked beautiful in a dress that must have cost a fortune. I watched from a small table in the corner as Kevin and Tiffany mingled, playing the role of gracious, successful hosts. They were so proud. I felt a small flicker of that pride, too. I had helped make this happen. 6 months came and went. The loan was never mentioned again. Not once. It was as if the conversation had never happened. I didn't bring it up. I was afraid of seeming petty, of disrupting the fragile peace I thought we had. I told myself it was a gift, a grandmother's gift, but it wasn't. It was the first installment payment in a long and costly scheme. It was the moment I stopped being a mother and became a line of credit. That first $10,000 opened a floodgate. It set a precedent. Once they knew I would say yes, the requests became a regular feature of my life. The shame of it is how predictable it all was. Just 6 months after the quinceañera, Kevin called again. This time, it was the kitchen. "The pipes are ancient, Mom," he said, his voice laced with manufactured panic. "There's dampness in the walls. We need $8,000 for repairs before it turns into a real disaster." I pictured my grandchildren living in a house with mold and wrote the check. I never saw a receipt for the work. I never saw a new kitchen. Then it was Tiffany's car. Her old one had broken down on the highway, a story told with dramatic flair. It was unsafe. They needed a reliable vehicle for the children. $12,000 for a down payment on a newer, safer model. I paid it. The safer model turned out to be a brand new Lincoln Navigator, but I only learned that later. The largest withdrawal came when my grandson, Jordan, was accepted into a private college. "A state school just isn't good enough for him, Mom," Kevin explained. "This is his future we're talking about." Over the next 3 years, I contributed $45,000 to that future. Each check was accompanied by promises of how this investment would pay dividends, how Jordan would one day be able to take care of all of us. Every single request was framed as a crisis, a temporary shortfall, an absolute necessity for the family's well-being. And I, raised in a generation where mothers sacrificed everything, saw it as my duty. You give your children what they need. It took me years and over $60,000 to finally understand the chasm between helping and being exploited, between love and emotional blackmail. In those first years after Arthur died, I was so afraid of being alone. They were my only family, my lifeline to the world. Their Sunday visits became a ritual. Kevin would sit in Arthur's old armchair, tell me about his week, and then just as he was about to leave, he'd drop the bomb. It was always casual, a footnote to the conversation, a new financial emergency that only I could solve. He never asked if I could afford it. He just assumed I would. And for a long, long time, he was right. I always did. Kevin had mastered the art of manipulation. He never framed his desires as his own. It was never "I want," it was always "we need." He presented every request as a selfless act for the good of the family, a burden he was reluctantly forced to carry. "Mom, Jordan needs a math tutor if he's going to get into a good school." "Mom, Brianna's teeth are getting crooked. She desperately needs braces." "Mom, the roof is leaking. We have to replace it before winter." He made me feel like I was a partner in protecting his family, a silent investor in their stability. My money wasn't for his wants, it was for his children's needs. Tiffany's method was different, more subtle, and somehow more cruel. Her weapon was guilt, wielded with surgical precision. She was an expert in passive aggression. She'd make comments designed to highlight the gap between her world and mine, making me feel small, out of place, and ultimately responsible for their perceived hardships. "Oh, Betty, it's a shame you can't make it to Jordan's birthday dinner at the yacht club," she'd say over the phone, "but I understand places like that are a bit formal for you." She knew I couldn't afford the membership, let alone the dinner. The follow-up would come a week later. "It's such a pity Brianna can't go on the class trip to Costa Rica," she would sigh. "But, well, not every child gets those kinds of opportunities." The implication hung in the air. Because of you. Because you have money sitting in an account while your granddaughter misses out. And like a fool, I'd fall for it every time. The guilt would gnaw at me until I'd call and offer to pay for the trip. She'd feign surprise, then accept with a reluctant, "Well, if you insist." These were the small financial bleeds. $3,000 for the trip, $2,000 for a club membership I was never invited to use. They were termites, eating away at the foundation of my savings. Looking back, I realized I was afraid. I was terrified to ask the hard questions. Where did the money for the last thing go? Can you show me a bill? Because asking would have meant risking the connection. It would have meant calling their bluff. And I was so scared of being alone that I was willing to pay any price to keep them close, even if their closeness was a complete fabrication. There were signs, of course. Cracks in the facade that I chose to ignore because facing the truth was too painful. Once I stopped by their house unannounced to drop off a birthday card for Jordan. Parked in their driveway was a brand new Lincoln Navigator, the kind with a price tag that makes you whistle. When I asked Kevin about it, he waved it off. "Oh, that, just borrowing it from a friend for the weekend." 2 months later, I saw Tiffany driving that same car. It wasn't borrowed, it was hers. The $12,000 I'd given her for a reliable vehicle had clearly been put to use. Another time, Brianna posted photos on Instagram from a weekend ski trip in Aspen. She and her friends were posing in expensive ski gear against a backdrop of snowy mountains. A weekend like that, even for a teenager, would cost at least $4,000. This was just 1 month after Kevin had called me, his voice tight with worry, complaining about an unexpected tax bill that had wiped them out. I told myself I was misunderstanding, that there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe his friend really did give him the car. Maybe Brianna won the trip. It was easier to lie to myself than to accept that my son, my only child, was a common thief dressed in a polo shirt. The price of my silence was a steady diet of crumbs. I got short, weekly phone calls that always felt rushed, visits that happened only when they needed something. And I got to watch my grandchildren grow up through the curated perfection of social media. I smiled. I played the part of the happy, supportive mother and grandmother. But inside, I felt like a dry well, and they just kept lowering the bucket, scraping the bottom for whatever was left. The real shift began about 6 months before the Hawaii trip. Tiffany's parents, the Vances, were celebrating their wedding anniversary. Tiffany threw them a lavish dinner party at an upscale restaurant downtown. I only found out about it because Brianna mentioned it casually on the phone. "Yeah, Grandma Vance's party was so fun," she said. The casualness of it was what hurt the most. I wasn't important enough to even be formally excluded. A strange feeling, one I hadn't felt in years, started to bubble up inside me. It wasn't sadness, it was anger. I called Kevin. My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "I heard you had a nice party for Robert and Helen," I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a slight, almost imperceptible hesitation. "Oh, yeah, that," he said, trying to sound casual. "It was just a small, intimate thing, Mom. You know, just for the Vance family." Just for the Vance family. The words hung there, drawing a clear line in the sand. I was not family. I was something else. I swallowed the humiliation one more time and said, "That's nice, dear," before hanging up. My neighbor, Grace, found me weeding my garden the next day with a ferocity that was unusual. Grace is 69, a widow like me, but she has a backbone made of pure steel. She took one look at my face and said, "Coffee. My place now." Over her kitchen table, for the first time, I told someone everything. The $10,000 for the party, The $45,000 for college, the constant stream of emergencies, the anniversary dinner. The words poured out of me like poison I'd been holding in for 8 years. Grace listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took a sip of her coffee and looked me straight in the eye. "Betty," she said, her voice firm but not unkind, "you are not a mother to them. You are a bank, and banks charge interest. What are you getting in return?" Her question hit me harder than any of Tiffany's insults. What was I getting? A few photos on Facebook and the privilege of being lied to. A month later, Jordan turned 21. His whole life, I'd been at every birthday party. I'd paid for more than a few of them. This time, I wasn't invited. They went to Las Vegas. I saw the pictures online. That night, the anger finally boiled over. It burned away the grief, the loneliness, the fear. For the first time, I felt something other than hurt. I felt rage. I went to the old filing cabinet where Arthur had kept all our records. I pulled out 8 years of my bank statements. With a calculator and a notepad, I sat at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning. I added up every transfer, every check written to Kevin or Tiffany. The final number stared back at me from the page, stark and unforgiving. $62,300. It wasn't a sum of money, it was a verdict. The number on the notepad, $62,300, haunted me for 2 weeks. It wasn't just a number, it was the weight of my own foolishness. Then Kevin appeared at my door. He didn't call first, he just showed up, his face etched with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. This wasn't a casual Sunday visit, this was business. He sat in Arthur's armchair and leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "Mom, I'm in trouble," he said, his voice low and urgent. He spun a tale about his medical equipment company. Layoffs were coming. His job was on the line. He needed a cushion, he said, a financial safety net to protect his family in case the worst happened. He needed $20,000. He looked at me, his eyes wide with feigned desperation. "You're our only hope," he whispered. "You're our insurance policy." He made it sound like I was the hero in his story, the one who could save them all. The old me, the one who existed before I did the math, would have written the check without a second thought. But the woman staring back at him now saw the performance for what it was. Still, I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed one final, undeniable piece of proof. I went to the bank the next day. The teller, a young woman named Sarah who had handled many of my transactions, looked at the transfer form with a worried expression. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Johnson?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She asked me 3 times. The pity in her eyes was almost as humiliating as my son's lies. I nodded and signed the paper. Kevin called that evening, his voice overflowing with theatrical gratitude. "You saved us, Mom. I swear I'll pay back every penny within 6 months." I felt a familiar, comforting warmth spread through my chest. The feeling of being needed, the feeling of being important. It was a lie, but it was a warm one. And then, silence. In the 2 months that followed, the weekly calls dwindled to short texts. The visits stopped completely. I was a well they had drawn from, and now that it was empty for the moment, they had moved on. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. It was Kevin. His tone was brisk, businesslike. "Just wanted to let you know," he said, "we had to cancel that family trip to Hawaii. With the job situation and everything, it's just not possible." Something in his voice, a lack of genuine disappointment, set off an alarm in my head. But I pushed it down. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. It was the last chance I would ever give him. "I understand, honey," I said. "Family first." 3 weeks later, I saw the Facebook post. The lie wasn't just in the money, it was in the details. The 14 photographs from the Four Seasons Resort in Maui were 14 pieces of evidence. They proved he had looked me in the eye and deliberately lied. They hadn't canceled a trip. They had planned my exclusion. They had used my $20,000 safety net to fund an extravagant vacation for themselves and, in the ultimate insult, for Tiffany's parents. They hadn't just taken my money, they had taken my place. I spent the next 3 weeks in a state of cold, quiet fury. The grief I'd felt for my dead husband was nothing compared to the grief I felt for my living son. Then, one morning at 7 a.m., my phone vibrated. It was a text from Kevin. There was no "good morning," no "how are you," just the raw, entitled demand. "Mom needs $6,000 urgently. Credit card issue. Pay you back next month." I stared at the message. He was sitting on a beach somewhere, having used my money, and now he was asking for more. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I felt something shift inside me, a final, definitive click. The old mom, the one who would have panicked and rushed to the bank, was gone. She had died the moment I saw those pictures. The woman holding the phone now was someone else entirely. My fingers, surprisingly steady, typed out a reply. 4 words. It was all that was needed. "Ask your wife's family." I hit send. The response was immediate. My phone began to ring. It was Kevin. I ignored it. It rang again and again. For 3 hours, my phone was a constant barrage of his calls and texts. 17 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. The power had shifted. For the first time in 8 years, I was the one who wasn't answering. When Kevin couldn't get through, Tiffany tried. A long, rambling text message appeared on my screen. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She accused me of acting like a child. She said I was tearing the family apart over a little misunderstanding. She ended with the classic line, "I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're being incredibly selfish." I didn't reply. That same day, I went to the bank. Sarah, the teller, saw me coming, and her expression softened with understanding. "I'm closing my joint account with my son," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I want to cancel his supplementary credit card and block all future automatic transfers." She didn't ask any questions. She just nodded and, with a quiet sadness, processed the paperwork that officially severed my financial ties to my child. A week later, Kevin's car screeched to a halt in my driveway. He hammered on my front door, his face red and distorted with anger. I opened it, but stood firm in the doorway, blocking his entrance. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded. "You've cut us off." "I am your mother, Kevin," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "Not your bank." He tried to lie, even then. His expression shifted from anger to a pathetic attempt at charm. "Mom, you misunderstood. The Hawaii trip. We were going to surprise you and fly you out later." The lie was so clumsy, so insulting, it was almost funny. Then he switched tactics. "I always paid you back." That was when I used my weapon, the one I had been holding for weeks. "Did you?" I asked. $62,300, Kevin. That's what you owe me." The color drained from his face. He stared at me, speechless. He had never imagined I was keeping track. He saw me as a sweet, clueless old woman. He never saw the accountant's daughter who had balanced her father's books since she was a teenager. When he found, his voice, it was laced with venom. "You'll die alone," he spat. "You know that, right? You'll die in this house, all alone." I looked at my son, this stranger standing on my doorstep, and felt nothing but pity. "I would rather be alone, Kevin," I said, "than be with people who only see me as a wallet." Then I closed the door. The silence in my house after I closed the door on Kevin was different. It wasn't the lonely, echoing silence I had feared for 8 years. It was peaceful. The next morning, Grace brought over coffee. "I heard shouting," she said, setting the mugs on my table. I told her what happened. She simply reached across and squeezed my hand. "It's about time, Betty," she said. "I'm proud of you." Her words were the permission I needed. That week, I did something I had put off for years. I drove to the community center and signed up for a pottery class. My hands, which had done nothing but write checks and tend to a garden, were soon covered in cool, wet clay. I learned to shape something from nothing, to create instead of just give away. In that class, I met other women whose children had moved across the country, women who were recently widowed, Women who were, like me, rediscovering who they were when they weren't just somebody's mother or somebody's wife. We talked. We laughed. We made lopsided bowls and drank bad coffee from the machine in the hallway. I was building something new. One evening, while flipping through a magazine, I saw an advertisement, a 10-day guided tour of Spain, Barcelona, Madrid, Seville. A spark ignited inside me. The next day, I walked into a travel agency. The tour cost $4,500. I paid for it in full with my debit card. It was the first truly wonderfully selfish thing I had done in decades. I felt no guilt, only a thrilling sense of anticipation. On my way home, I bought a new, sturdy suitcase and a dress in a bold shade of mustard yellow. It was a color I never would have dared to wear before. It was the color of a new sunrise. I realized as I hung it in my closet that I was no longer afraid. I didn't care what Kevin or Tiffany said or did. Their power over me was gone. When my new friends dropped me off at O'Hare Airport a month later, I felt lighter than I had felt in years. I was flying toward a new version of myself. 2 weeks before my trip, an unexpected email appeared in my inbox. The sender was Robert Vance, Tiffany's father. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. The message was short and direct. He wrote that he and his wife had only just learned the truth about how the Hawaii trip was funded. He said if he had known about the lies, he never would have gone. He ended the email with a simple, heartfelt apology for his daughter and son-in-law's behavior. It was a small gesture from a decent man, but it meant the world. It was proof that I wasn't crazy. Then, the day before I was scheduled to fly to Spain, my phone rang. The caller. ID said Jordan, my grandson. I hesitated, then answered. His voice was quiet, nervous. "Grandma?" he said. I needed to call. I'm so sorry." He told me he knew. He had known for years about the money, about the lies. He called himself a silent accomplice, a coward for not speaking up. "They're in serious trouble, Grandma," he confessed, his voice cracking. "They always lived way beyond their means. They counted on your money like it was part of their salary." He told me he was getting his own apartment, that he didn't agree with how they had treated me. He asked if, when I got back, he could start over. Just him and me. Build a real relationship, one based on respect, not transactions. After we hung up, I sat on my sofa and cried. Not tears of sadness or anger, but tears of profound relief. The chain of toxicity had been broken. My decision hadn't just saved me, it had given my grandson a chance to become a better man than his father. Spain was a revelation. I walked through the vibrant streets of Barcelona, stood in awe before the art in Madrid, and listened to flamenco music under the stars in Seville. I discovered that I was good company for myself. I learned that my value was not tied to how much someone needed me. I was valuable just because I existed. When I returned home, tanned and rested, there was a cardboard box on my doorstep. It was from Kevin. Inside, tucked among old family photos and kindergarten drawings, was a letter and a check. The check was for $5,000. The memo line read, "First payment." In a long, rambling letter, he admitted everything. He wrote that he and Tiffany had started therapy. He said he was ashamed. He promised to pay back the entire debt, $1,000 a month, no matter how long it took. I put the check in a drawer. I didn't cash it. Not yet. Their words had been worthless for years. I decided to wait and see if their actions held any weight. My life settled into a new, happy rhythm. Pottery on Tuesdays, lunch with Grace on Thursdays, and coffee with Jordan every Sunday morning. He was a good kid, and I was so grateful to have him back. 6 months passed. Every month, a check for $1,000 arrived in the mail. I finally deposited them all. Our relationship was not fixed, but it was different. It was distant, but it was honest. There were boundaries now, solid and unbreakable. 2 years later, I went back to Spain. This time, Grace came with me. We drank wine and ate tapas and laughed until our sides hurt. Kevin was still making his monthly payments. He was a little more than a quarter of the way through his debt. I was at peace. At 74 years old, I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life. True love doesn't empty your bank account, and it certainly doesn't hollow out your soul. I didn't lose $62,300. I invested it. I bought my freedom, my dignity, and my peace of mind, and it was the best money I ever spent. Thanks for listening. If any part of this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own experiences, share your thoughts below. I value every comment. And if you'd like to join me for more stories, hit like and subscribe. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.